Well, I hope everyone's been having a great day, and it's been a real pleasure to hear from the last two speakers, to hear kind of how technology in Silicon Valley are really being harnessed directly to drive outcomes for our community. The next two speakers you're going to hear from are developing products and technology that aren't necessarily directly geared towards the government or municipalities, but are incredible representations of major trends that are going on around mobile, cloud, wearables that will be increasingly relevant to kind of every element of society and government. And so I think it'll be really interesting to hear kind of another perspective on what Silicon Valley's working on right now. And so first you'll be hearing from Toby Cory, who's the CEO of tuul and the former Chief Revenue Officer of SolarCity, a company I'm sure you're all familiar with. There, he helped lead, one of the premier clean energy service companies to over $6 billion in market cap, and has successfully managed over $3 billion businesses, 2 IPOs, and over $300 million raised in private equity and public equity funding. And so it's my real pleasure to introduce Toby Cory, CEO of tuul.
Thanks, Alex. All right. Thanks for having me here today. Real quick background, I think Alex covered it pretty well. Was at SolarCity for the last couple of years, helped get them public at the end of 2012. Most of you probably know Lyndon Rive, my former boss, and Elon Musk, our chairman of the board. Before that, I had the opportunity to create the world's largest web development company in the 90s, grew that to 5,000 employees doing some of the most exciting web development projects on the planet. And then before that, I spent some time at Novell running a $1 billion business there. And what I wanted to share with you today, a couple charts that I wanted to go through. So the first sort of message I want to leave you guys with is that we're in the midst of what I believe is going to be the greatest decade of innovation in the history of humanity. And the key contributing factors to that are, first and foremost, is that we are in the midst of a paradigm shift of this technology called mobile computing. And 2.5 billion people have these smart mobile computing devices in the palm of their hand today. See, everyone has their mobile computing device with them today. And probably within 5 years, certainly no more than a decade, every human being on the planet is going to have one of these devices in the palm of their hand. The CPU processing power is getting stronger and stronger. Bandwidth is getting larger and larger, and the costs are going down at a radical rate. So that's one of the major components driving the most incredible disruption in humanity. Secondly, is that there's been more money poured into innovation than no other time in the history of humanity. So over the last 3 years, over $100 billion has poured in the hands of new startups, young entrepreneurs, old entrepreneurs, driving massive innovation in the marketplace. And lastly, software used to take a really long time and a lot of money to develop. And the world's changed so radically. It used to take many, many years to develop an application, an enterprise application, can literally be done in months at 1/10 of the cost. Look at what Uber's doing. It's a fairly simple application that's completely disrupting a massive new industry. And what this is all leading to is that over the next decade, whether it's a private or public sector entity, the real value creation is going to literally be in the ability to serve the customer well. You swap customer for private entity or a citizen really well. And the opportunity for these new innovations to emerge for private and public sector companies is going to be extraordinary. So in the past, we've had this sort of massive revolution going back from the manufacturing industrial era, the rise of distribution, the rise of the internet era. And as big as the internet economy was, I had the opportunity to participate in that in a fundamental way. And one of the predictions I made back in 1998 was that 50% of the S&P would turn over in less than 10 years. And I was a little bit off. It was 47.8% of the S&P turned over in less than 10 years with the rise of the internet economy. And we're in the midst now of a major revolution on mobile computing. What the real value is, everything underneath that is really a commodity. Everyone has access to Salesforce.com or Smartsheets or a content management system or what have you. But the real magic is in how do I serve my customers better? That is where the real value is going to be created. And again, I don't care if it's a private or a public entity. And the challenge, of course, is that everyone wants to create that awesome type of experience. And for those that haven't used Uber, probably heard of it, in the old days, getting a cab, and I'm going to really date myself right now, it was a bad experience. I called up a cab, I had to find the number, call the cab company. Maybe they show up, maybe they don't. I get in, I tell the driver where I'm going 3 or 4 times and get to where I get to. Today, there's a smart network out there, it knows where I'm at. I plug in the address I'm going to, I tap Get Ride, the car magically shows up, I go to my destination and I get out. That is the example of what entities that are going to be successful in the 21st century, the kind of service they need to deliver. Now, of course, the challenge is that everyone wants to deliver great service, but how do I do that without adding massive cost on the other end? Of course, everyone likes to deliver a Zappos-like experience or an Uber-like experience, or pick your favorite high-end hotel. And the challenge has always been around doing that in a really cost-effective way, other than hiring more people to serve those needs. So we're working at tuul to try and address that problem. And the other thing I should note before I do that is that with the rise of mobile computing technology, I talked about 2.5 billion people having these devices. Most corporations today, and I would guarantee all municipalities today, your employees and staff members all have these devices in their hands. Lots of them are communicating with one another. That exists kind of outside of your infrastructure or constituents. The same thing's happening in the private sector. So when I ran Solar City, I gave my mobile phone out to lots of customers that may have had a bad installation or issue. All that data sitting out there unsecured. The company can't take advantage of that at all. So businesses are just beginning to think about, how do I take advantage of this mobile computing revolution, as I'm sure most public sector companies, entities are as well. So what we've come up with and literally just launched this week is a mobile automation platform that simplifies communication. So the beauty of it is, and I actually have an example that I can share with you today. So we are launching the city of Santa Cruz next week on a program around graffiti abatement. So in this case here, they have a system where a user can report a graffiti issue, and there's a lot of kind of process and workflow that needs to happen. But with tuul, basically, it's a SaaS product that lives in the Amazon cloud. It's super secure. And you literally can be up and running instantly with the product. So as an admin tool, you set your entity up in that. And in this case here, so what we've set up is the city of Santa Cruz has a series of individuals that are responsible for that program. And they're also connected with other cross-functional organizations in order to deal with this particular issue. So they've got a third-party abatement processor. There's the police department and several other entities. And they're all loaded into the tuul system together. And then on their website, we'll be adding a web page that allows the individual to report a graffiti issue. And that'll all come through tuul. And that can either happen on the web or happen on their mobile phone. So it gets reported, the address can be easily collected, the citizen can actually take a photo of where that graffiti is showing up. That goes into the back-end individual that's processing that. They can immediately start messaging with the constituents within the organization to help solve that issue. So directly to the abatement processor, directly to the police chief, the several others that they're communicating with and orchestrating this entire workflow process. And on top of that, they're also looking to drive down costs by getting more citizens involved. And about 50% of the abatement issues can actually be solved by a local citizen. So in that case, they can begin to actually sign up more individuals and actually have the citizens take care of the smaller abatement issues on their own with the graffiti kit that they can send out. And at the same time, lowering costs and getting this done where the citizen doesn't call up, the phone call goes into a black hole, everyone's really busy, you don't have time to message them or call that individual back. In this case, it all happens on a mobile computing paradigm. Push notifications show up. The citizen gets notified immediately. We're aware of the situation. Thanks so much. Collects all the data that's needed. That transfers over into the abatement processor, into the police chief if they want to, or the police department if they want to actually fill out a report for that. We'll also be linking in the city of Capitola and the city of SoCal. And if this pilot goes really well, we'll be looking to actually expand that out to other departments within those particular municipalities. So the real focus is how do we deliver better service while at the same time radically reducing costs. And one of the phenomenons, of course, is that most organizations are dealing with antiquated communication services. So phone, no one wants to get on the phone today. My daughters, they don't call me, they text me over the phone. It's fast, it's efficient. I see lots of texting going on here. And as powerful as email was, the problem with email is that it's really more of an asynchronous communication model in that most people get an email. How many emails do you get a day? Probably a lot. You'll categorize the top ones. I want to get to those right away. And the other ones, maybe 2-3 days go by, but by the time I get around to actually responding to that email. So thinking about the mobile revolution now, and that most of you probably when you get a text, you're able to respond to that really quickly. It could be in the movie theater, in a conference room, in a meeting, wherever that might be. So all this prior communication latency that was very costly and really inefficient begins to get solved really quickly with this mobile computing technology. So we're actually rolling out several, obviously given my expertise in clean energy with the likes of Solar City and lots of solar companies. And for those that haven't gotten solar, it's a fairly complex process to get that with getting a permit for the structure and coordinating with the homeowner and all of that. We're working with mortgage companies, transportation companies, airline companies, and really excited about what our technology has to offer. So what we've been really focused on is, certainly in the public sector, or the private sector, is the opportunity to allow you guys to, for those that are interested, give me a shout, drop me an email. You know, we're happy to sort of donate the technology into we're certainly doing that in Santa Cruz. And if there's interest here with some of these municipalities, give me a shout. And we're happy to learn more about what your issues are, and possibly Tool can solve that for you. So, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Toby.